This week on the podcast, a very happy new year to you as we deep dive back through 2024 to give you all the juicy best bits. Welcome to the Profit Cash Growth Podcast. This is the podcast for 6- and 7-figure business owners who are looking to grow a financially successful business. My co-host, Claire Hancott, is a finance director, chartered accountant and entrepreneur. And every week, I'll be exploring guidance and frameworks designed to help you increase your profits, improve your cash flow and grow your business. So, Claire, I think this could officially be the most depressing day of the year for most people. Is that your thinking? 2nd of January? It depends whether they've gone back to work today or a lot of people closed down. Probably just written off the rest of this week and just said, I'm starting back at work on Monday. I mean, we're back at work, aren't we? But
we never really stopped work, though.
No.
I can remember those.
In fact, I guess a lot of people that listen to this probably never stopped, do they?
I can remember being an employee and that thought of going back on the 2nd of January, especially if you're in a business that closes down throughout Christmas and New Year, was utter hell. And I think it's been very different since we've run our own businesses, that the feeling is a bit different. Actually, I tend to go back in January like, okay, I'm not looking forward to the first couple of days of really catching up on emails and making up for lost time, but I am so fired up about the year to come. And it's such a mind shift versus an employee versus a business owner.
I'd agree with that, because actually the first things I want to do in the first few weeks of January is think about what January is supposed to be about this year, and what things we should be spending money on marketing. Should we do something different? Should we not do something? How do we achieve the targets last year? What should we achieve this year? And it does get you in that mindset, which is why in the coming weeks we're going to be covering exactly that, aren't we? So I know today we're going to do a bit of a roundup of the best of the year so that people can dive back through and learn from the 2024 episodes, but keep tuning in, because in the next 3 weeks we're going to get really serious about this year. We're going to be giving you loads of juicy bits, and we're starting next week's with three numbers, or the only 3 numbers that every business should plan.
Yep. Forget complex budgets and writing down meaningless targets and things like that. We'll give you exactly the 3 numbers that you need to be planning, and it will not take you too long to do, and we'll just give you the best targets to set your business up for success next year.
Yes.
So that'll be our next episode. This year, it's 2025 now. I've got to get used to that. Exactly. I still feel like we're in the year 2000. Yeah. When somebody says to me something was like 30 years ago, I think that they mean the 1970s.
I know.
And
it's crazy, isn't it?
It's quite scary that was like 55 years ago now.
Anyway, let's quickly look at this week's news story of the week. So in this week's news story of the week, I just want to quickly touch on, we won't go into great detail about this, but have you heard about the great Guinness shortage?
Yes.
It's gathering momentum. This is a story that was like weeks ago. I saw this thing of Guinness I thought it was a bit of a publicity stunt. Guinness were talking about we may run out over Christmas, and it's actually kind of happened. They've had to like redirect stock that they would usually have in Ireland, and they'd build up for St. Patrick's Day and all this, and they're redirecting it into Britain for to deal with the festive rush. And do you know who caused this rush?
Well, I was reading about this, and the biggest increase in Guinness sales is coming from younger females, under 35.
That's it. Yes.
And there's even like a Guinness challenge now that has been spreading on TikTok, and this has been the cause of quite a lot of it. There's a Guinness challenge where you're supposed to have a sip of Guinness, and is it called cut the G?
No, it's called splitting the G.
Split the G, that's it.
Splitting the G.
You're supposed to basically sip your Guinness in one guzzle so that the top line of the Guinness splits the G on the glass in half.
Crazy, isn't it? And apparently Diageo, the company that own Guinness, they are kind of distancing themselves from that,
from splitting the G,
because of responsible drinking and all the rest of it, but are secretly delighted that this has just gathered momentum. Now, apparently they are responsible. Again, it goes to show the power of getting your social media campaign right. They have deliberately orchestrated social media campaigns to try and target younger drinkers of Guinness
on TikTok.
And it is absolutely worked, hasn't it? It's just unbelievable.
The problem any business has, though, when it has this sort of like temporary increase, that this whole thing of like splitting the G, okay, yes, they're, ultimately some of these young female drinkers that are doing these TikTok challenges will will maybe go on to become long-term Guinness drinkers. But undoubtedly, a lot of them are buying a Guinness, probably once in a lifetime to do this challenge. And it's very difficult for a business to temporarily ramp up production like this, because somebody like Guinness is going to be working near on full capacity most of the year. They will be very into their KPIs around how optimal the factory's working and try and get as close to 100% just-in-time production. So they don't really have the capacity to ramp up and ramp down production with demand. And that's, a real significant issue in a business like this, is they've spent all this money on marketing and now they can't really fulfill it and utilise it. So
kind of, I don't know, it is bad, but if your marketing campaign's gone so much better than you expected, then you can't really cry about it too much, can you? I mean, it's a great product sampling exercise, because the thing is with products is the big thing they do is give away the products. I used to have it a lot when I worked in newspapers. They would literally just want to give one away, like they did with magazines and things, because they know that a percentage of them will stick and become long-term customers. And you hope that that's the case here. Yes, it'll be a bit faddy, but how many might get a taste for it and go, I've never tried that, and I've had a chance to try it. And now, they pick up a longer term tail of sales from the other side of it. So well done Diageo and Guinness for, to actually nailing a really good social media campaign. But
I think as well, we'll now see a boom in, 10, 15 years ago, it was a boom in gin sales, then it was craft beers, and then it was craft rums. And I think the next thing is going to be craft Guinness. And we'll see all these independent...
Craft stouts, because you can't use the brand.
You can't use the brand. But we'll see all these little independent sort of breweries pop up and start, I don't know, do you brew or do you stew? I don't really know what you do to produce stout. But yeah, I'm quite sure that we'll see a bit of a boom in this, and we'll see all these recipes popping up. This will be the next thing, recipes of how you can use it. All sorts of drinks and dinners that you never even knew would taste better with Guinness in them will now becoming a thing.
Possibly. Okay, well, let's move on to rewind in 2024. So in this episode, before we move on to this year's content, where we're going to obviously cover the usual fantastic array of things to help you improve your cash flow and increase your profits and grow your business, we wanted to do a quick roundup of all of the episodes that we did in 2024, picking out first of all, the 3 most popular by you in terms of the most downloaded episodes. And then I picked my 3 favourite episodes just personally from last year and what I've learned.
Now, just before we do this, I am a bit astounded that we're only in our first year. This is our first time we've reached a year end, isn't it? First full year of doing the podcast. We started in January 24, didn't we? And in that time, we've charted
many times,
which has been business charts, quite an achievement that we didn't think that we'd get. And we've actually secured a couple of customers from this podcast as well. Not people that have necessarily found us through the podcast, but people that found us through other avenues. And then,
but I've just enjoyed and learned and understood the key, understood some of the key factors and the things they should be doing with their business. So yeah, it's great. We get some great feedback, don't we? So
yeah, but I absolutely love doing this podcast. And if I'm honest, when we started it, it was a bit fun. And we thought, you listen to a lot of people that do this and they say it takes years and years. But do you know what? We probably haven't yet got a return on the time that we've invested, but I can see it will happen.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you look at most podcasts, they start to return between years 5 and 7. Yeah. So, so it's a long tail. And but I think as long as people get value from it, as long, if we enjoy doing it, then that's great. And I just think, I said to you at the time, didn't I? If this was around when I was starting my business, I'd absolutely love it. It's just amazing. It's just pure education mixed with a bit of humour, shall we say. So anyway, moving on to the top 3 most popular episodes of last year. And number 1 really surprised me. Number 2 didn't, but number 1 really surprised me. The most downloaded episode last year was episode number 40. It was released on the 7th of November, and it was called Salary Sacrifice Secrets, Boosting Your Benefits. Tell me, Claire. This I felt like was what I would call quote unquote filler.
I bloody hate that this is the most popular episode ever, because I hate talking about tax savings, because I just really feel like, we did this one episode and we told somebody how they could save like £45 tax in a year, and it's the most popular episode we've ever done. But we've done so many other episodes about how you could grow your profit by like 450,000. But no, the one that people are drawn to is the £45 saving one. Yeah.
So if you haven't listened to that one, check that out.
It's all about electric cars, isn't it?
Released on the 7th of November. Actually, they there's not huge amounts of things you can do with salary sacrifice. It's really electric cars, it's really pensions, but really worth a listen. The second most downloaded episode last year, which I thought was going to be really popular when we did it, I'm a bit gutted it didn't get number one, and that is Mastering the Big 5 Numbers for Explosive Profit and Growth. It was episode 35 and it was released on the 3rd of October. So do go and check that one out, because it's a real back to basics sort of podcast. There's nothing in there that's, completely revolutionary, but it really is going through your P&L and really explaining what all the key numbers mean and how you should be thinking about them. And I found it, I love going back to basics. So I think we overcomplicate everything. I love the simplicity of that one. And then the third most popular one worth looking at, and again, I think this is good, and we see that episodes around exiting your business are often popular. We had 2 or 3 last year. This one was called Selling, Scaling or Surrendering, Choosing Your Business Exit. It was episode 36 and it was released on the 10th of October. And this was using a case study, a customer of yours, wasn't it?
This episode, I also posted about this on my LinkedIn page. Basically, it's a story about a customer that I'm working with at the moment. They want to retire and they've got to decide, they're not quite at retirement age yet, they've got to decide whether they go another 5 years really hard and grow their business, whether they look to sell it now or whether they look to try and put a management team in place and sort of step back and become a silent shareholder. This is a real life case study of a business that I'm working with at the moment and the different payout values actually that the business owner would have realised. And this was my most popular LinkedIn post as well that I did all year. So people really love this stuff. But it was interesting because actually I think that this business owner is kind of at the point where they're flirting with the idea of selling it, but I think ultimately they're just going to shut this business down and cash out because they're very asset rich, and I think they're just going to walk away because they're like, I can't be dealing with it. Like, yes, I might get a few million, but by the time I pay tax on it, I could probably walk away with about £1 million cash right now and not deal with the hassle. So interesting one, and people
love like the options being laid out to them.
We'll probably do an update on that one.
Could be really good. So they're the 3 most downloaded as decided by you guys, but 3 episodes that I enjoyed personally myself. So the first one I really enjoyed was episode 23, released on the 11th of July, and that was called The Cash Flow Secret That 99% of Business Owners Miss. And you taught us in that episode, Claire, the difference between cash and equity in a way I hadn't thought about it before.
Yeah, so I think this was a bit of an eye-opener when I am preparing a board pack for business owners and we look at this and I say, this is how much equity you've got in your business. So equity is essentially, it's the retained profits that you built up over the years. So every time you make profit and you don't take it out of the business as dividends, it's what's left. And it's understanding the gap between the equity you've got in your business, so the profits, and how much cash you've got. Because often as a business owner, you think you're not taking dividends because, you want to grow the business, but actually where's that cash going? And it's about understanding the gap between cash and equity, why it's there, and then trying to narrow that gap as much as possible so that you've got more cash freed up for investments or to reward yourself as a business owner and take dividends out of the business. Yeah.
I found it really interesting. I learned a lot there because, it really did touch on some things that I didn't know. The second episode that I learned a lot from this year was, is your bookkeeper really balancing your books? It was episode 32 and it was released on the 12th of September if you want to go and have a look at that one. For me, this was like, as a business owner, and I know lots of business owners, they start with one of their early hires being a bookkeeper who basically starts to do the things, but the business owner themselves is ill-equipped to know how to manage their bookkeeper and whether they're doing a good job or not. And this really went back to basics of what does balancing the books actually mean? I found it fascinating. Really good episode.
And do you know what? It's also like with any profession, if you're a pilot, pilot's quite a wide-ranging category from people that fly these little one-seater prop planes right up to people that fly jumbo jets with hundreds of passengers on. And it's like, as your business is growing, have you got the appropriately skilled and experienced person to run your finance department? And I think a lot of people take their bookkeeper at the very start of their business and they try and grow their business with that bookkeeper, and actually their business has outgrown that bookkeeper's skills. So it's about understanding, okay, firstly as a business owner, what do you need to check? What processes do you need in place, and how do you know if your bookkeeper's got everything covered? Is the first step. And then understanding how you appoint the correct finance team as well. That's really important.
Yeah. So I really found that useful. I think most business owners will find that really useful if they wanted just a 101, if they have got a bookkeeper or they're thinking of getting their own bookkeeper. Definitely listen to that one, because that's going to educate you on, how you recruit the right person, how you manage that person. And then finally, which I just found it was just such fun, this episode. So this was episode 11. So early on, it was on the 11th of April. It was released. It was called Profitable Dilemma: to Reinvest or Enjoy the Rewards. And the reason I love this is it was a battle off, wasn't it?
Yeah, we didn't want to do this.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it because we took sides and we fought hard between. I took the side of wanting to effectively draw lots of my profits out of my business and reward myself for it, and all the reasons and the things that I could do with that. And you took the other side, didn't you?
Begrudgingly, yes, for the purpose of the episode. But I'd just like to put it out there that I don't think that you should do either as a black and white rule, and that you should be both rewarding yourself for your hard work and reinvesting your money. But there's lots of pros and cons.
Such an accountant.
I think you can never be so for or against something. Like there's always a middle ground. It's normally the way.
The beauty of it is there was no right or wrong answer, but it was enjoyable to battle it off.
Yeah.
And the reality is that it's such a personal decision how you run your business from that perspective.
Yes, and I think really we flirted with lots of the pros and cons, because ultimately most business owners will be running it and they'll be thinking, yeah, I want to grow my business a bit, but really I just want, a good lifestyle. And you've got the others that are like, I'll live on beans on toast if my business is going to get big.
Yes.
The majority probably sit somewhere in the middle,
and they do
and want to strike the right balance between having a good lifestyle but also growing a really good business. And I think we just talk about the long-term implications of each different strategy, because actually one isn't more right than the other, and even when you go down the middle, there's sacrifices and there's compromises and there's long-term implications.
So there you go. If you don't have the time to go back and listen to all 47 episodes last year, then do make sure that you at least listen to the 3 most downloaded by our audience and the 3 that I found the most beneficial, because before you start with this year, you definitely need to enjoy those. And I'm sure you've got a bit of time before you really hit it hard back in the workplace. So do take your time out and have a look at that. And we have got some further stuff in Profit Cash Growth Extra today. So this week's Profit Cash Growth Extra, we've been away in Tenerife for quite some time over the Christmas period, haven't we, Claire? And I thought we'd just cram in quite a few little Profit Cash Growth Extras from our time in Tenerife. We've got a couple of books, but I'm just going to also talk about a couple of fun things we watched on Netflix as well. So 2 recommendations for everybody. La Palma, fantastic. I think that is trending in the UK now, isn't it? It
is La Palma. It's about the volcano. And do you know what was really ironic is we were watching the final episode. Basically, it's about this volcano going off in La Palma, and the only safe place is this tiny little, basically most of like Africa and the world has been wiped out by this mega tsunami, and the only place that was safe was this tiny little fishing village in Tenerife called La Caleta, which is where we were staying.
Which is bizarre.
So it was bizarre.
And I thought it was just picking up the fact we were in Tenerife and showing us programs that were a bit obscure, because it's actually a Norwegian program with dubbed English over the top. Very, very strange.
Based in La Palma.
Only to find out when I got back that it's trending massively in the UK and people are loving it, absolutely loving it. It was a bit far-fetched in the end, but really, really, really good fun. Only sort of 4 episodes. So really like that, and really enjoyed Churchill at War.
Yeah, that was really good. That was on Netflix,
the Winston
as well.
Churchill documentary. Fantastic. And that was, again, 3 or 4 episodes. Just these short series they're doing now that are an hour long each. Really enjoyed that.
Do you know what else we did actually, which we didn't discuss about adding this in, but I'm going to tell people about, is, when you're with somebody, like just us one-on-one for like 4 weeks, the dinner conversation can get a little bit, what on earth have we got to talk about? We've been lying next to each other all day on sun lounges, and now we're sitting next to each other at dinner. And we did play a bit of a fun game one night, didn't we? Where we just wrote down some emotions on little bits of scraps of paper, and we took them to dinner with us, didn't we? And we pulled them one by one, and we had to act them out and guess what the other person was doing. And we thought that I would be terrible at the facial expressions, but brilliant at guessing. Yeah. And it was completely the opposite way around, wasn't it?
It's because I was reading a book about, where humans came from and things about, like, before, the first humans obviously didn't have language, so they had to communicate only through body language, facial expressions and all that. So we said, imagine what it'd be like to do that. So that was mental. And 2 favourite books. So I had a favourite book, you had a favourite book. What's yours, Claire?
So my favourite book is this book here called Prisoners of Geography by Tim Marshall. And I actually bought this in WH Smith at the airport. I hadn't planned on taking this, and I saw it and I thought it sounds right up my street. And basically it's a little bit of an overview about why the world is why it is, economically, boundary-wise, things like that. And there's so much of it is based off
driven on geography.
The geography. It's things like, well, why, for example, was like Hitler able to take over so much of Europe? Well, it's because it's so flat. And why has there been a boundary between, why have, for example, China and India never been at war? Well, because there's a mountain range in between them that neither of them can cross, and it would be very difficult to do. Yeah. So, and also a lot about the economical way that countries are set up, their river networks, how close they are to ports, things like that. Just things that maybe in the modern world we take for granted, that explains economically why countries are, why they are, why wars have happened, why certain countries are good at certain things. I just found it absolutely interesting. There's maybe like 10 or 12 chapters and they each cover like a different part of the world, and it's just absolutely fascinating. It's really made me look at things very, very differently. That's for sure.
Interesting. It's a mixture of leisure and economics, really. Yes. Entertainment and economics, that book. Mine, on the other hand, was deeply depressing because it was called The Great Depression, a Diary. So this is fun. This was recommended by Morgan Housel, who's written a couple of very good books, Psychology of Money and Same as Ever recently. And he said this was kind of a lot of his study for the way that he thinks about kind of the world and investing and how things, don't change. Basically, it's a guy who literally kept a diary almost every day throughout the Great Depression from
that started in
1929 right through to the late 1930s. And it's fascinating. What I think is most fascinating about it is how, the whole process and the talk and the human behaviour, you could be reading it in 2008 in the great financial crisis. Then it's all just very much the same. Nothing changes, and the way that people behave doesn't change. And it's just fascinating because it helps you better read the future if you really understand the past.
I read this book as well, and I found it quite difficult to read. It was quite repetitive, I think, because it's somebody's diary. It's literally like daily or weekly inserts, and not much is changing. He's talking about the stock price, he's talking about consumer behaviour, how people are feeling. But there was one thing that I found, three things in there actually that I found really fascinating throughout, is he consistently talked about the output of the local steel factory. That was kind of a gauge of how well the economy was doing. And then two trends that he kept coming back to, which I found fascinating, because I have a bit of a bee in my bonnet about these days, is that he was talking about how it had become fashionable for people to pretend they were poor.
Oh, yeah.
And I feel like we're kind of in, not many people are poor. Like, don't get me wrong, everybody's finances have been stretched a little bit in the so-called, like crisis that we've had at the moment, the cost of living crisis, if you like. But really, the vast majority of people are still eating out a lot of time, buying nice clothes, they're buying presents for Christmas and things like that. So I think it's become a bit fashionable to be poor.
Yeah. And they can only compare themselves to current circumstances compared to the most wealthy in 1929. The very poorest are still better off now.
And he was talking about how, people would brag about how frugal they've been and how long they'd had their clothes for and how long they'd been before since they had a holiday and things like that. And another thing he talked about a lot was about how he felt people were taking advantage of like the equivalent of food banks as well, which I found really interesting, because it's something you see in the news a lot, is about how the use of food banks has gone up. And I kind of think how much of that is because it's now readily available, and he talks about that as an issue then. So it just really sort of hammered home to me that people, societies, economics, nothing changes. It's the same.
Exactly. That's what I loved about it.
So I found it a tough read, but there were snippets that were fascinating.
Next time something happens in your business, something happens in the economy that panics
read the book.
Read the book and you'll realise there's no need to panic.
It's okay.
It's all happened before.
After a couple of world wars, it'll be fine again.
Exactly.
Don't worry about
That's what they do say. Anyway, so I hope you found that fascinating episode. Lots to dive into to get you started for the new year. Books, programmes, back catalogue of podcasts, everything that you want. And as always, if you do feel like you may have outgrown your account, do get in touch with Claire and the team at Profit Cash Growth. You can go to profitcashgrowth.com, check out the YouTube channel, and we will see you again next week for normal service being resumed and lots of juicy new content ahead for 2025. Enjoy!